I sent the coded telegram from Tokyo and waited for the system in Moscow to move. Days passed, and the orders stayed the same. Avoid provocation. Trust the paper promises. Then the reports turned into smoke and broken lines, and my warning became a document on a desk. In the quiet after transmission, I understood what it meant to be right too early. June 1941. Tokyo, Japan. Germany and the Soviet Union are still bound on paper by a non-aggression pact. Along the Soviet western border, German formations have been concentrating for weeks. In Moscow, the leadership is trying to avoid any step that might be interpreted as a pretext for war. Inside the Soviet intelligence apparatus, reports arrive daily. Some are accurate, some are not. All of them must pass through institutions trained to suspect deception. In this environment, one telegram will be written, transmitted, received, and set aside. Tokyo is far from the border forests and rivers where infantrymen stand watch, but Tokyo is one of the few places where the Soviet state still has eyes close to German intentions. The German embassy in Japan is active. Japanese ministries are full of officers and clerks who discuss policy with surprising openness in the right company. Foreign correspondents move between receptions, cafes, and offices. Some are genuine journalists. Some are collectors of details. One of these men is working under an assumed identity and a carefully built reputation. He is known publicly as a German journalist. He rides motorcycles. He drinks with diplomats. He speaks with confidence about politics and economics. He appears to be a man who belongs among Germans abroad. His name, to the people who direct him, is Richard Sorge. His value is not built on dramatic acts. It is built on routine. The routine of arriving on time. The routine of listening without interrupting. The routine of remembering what others forget they said. The routine of writing it down later in a plain room under ordinary light. Sorge is not alone. His work depends on a small circle. There is a radio operator, Max Clausen, who can send messages in coded form. There are contacts who can place him near information that is not meant for him. One of the most important is Hatsumi Ozaki, a Japanese journalist and advisor who moves in political circles. This network is not large. It cannot afford waste or carelessness. By mid-1941, the flow of information has become urgent. Reports from different sources, in different countries, are converging on the same conclusion. Germany is preparing to attack the Soviet Union. The question now is not whether. The question is when. In Moscow, the question is handled in a different way. Soviet leadership does not doubt that Germany might eventually turn east, but it believes timing can be managed. It believes Germany is still committed in the West. It believes Britain is trying to provoke conflict between Berlin and Moscow. It believes that some reports may be planted. It believes that mobilization on the border may itself trigger what it is meant to prevent. The official posture along the frontier is therefore cautious. Units are told to maintain readiness without creating incidents. Commanders are reminded not to provoke. Aircraft are kept in patterns that do not look like preparation for offensive action. At a simple decision, whether to bring ammunition forward, whether to disperse aircraft, whether to move formations out of vulnerable camps, becomes entangled in political interpretation. The intelligence apparatus is also entangled. Reports must climb desks. They must be evaluated by officers who know the consequences of being wrong. They must be written in careful language. They must be delivered to men who distrust messengers as much as messages. In Tokyo, Sorge observes the German diplomatic world with an attention that others mistake for sociability. German embassy officials speak more freely when they believe they are among friends. They talk about victories and needs. They talk about shipping. They talk about raw materials. They talk about the inevitable settling of accounts with the Soviet Union. The German ambassador in Tokyo, Eugen Ott, has a relationship with Sorge that is unusually close. Ott sees him as useful, a man who can explain Japan and its leaders, a man with connections. Sorge cultivates that perception with care. He does not appear eager. He does not appear to press for secrets. He listens. He encourages Ott to speak as an authority. He accepts small confidences as if they were casual. As spring turns into early summer, the tone of conversations shifts. The embassy receives communications that change its focus. German officers in Tokyo speak of the East with less hesitation. The Japanese side, for its part, weighs its own choices. Japan is already at war in China. Its planners consider the South, where oil and rubber are located, and they consider the North, where the Soviet Far East appears as both threat and opportunity. Sorge's task is to transmit what he can confirm, not rumors alone, not wishful thinking, not what he wants Moscow to believe. He must send what he can support through observation and source. The process of sending is itself hazardous. A radio transmission can be detected. A cipher can be broken. A courier can be followed. The smallest pattern, a light burning late, a visitor at the wrong hour, can cause attention. The network's survival depends on ordinary appearance. Clausen's equipment is kept hidden. Transmissions are timed. Messages are compressed. Codes are used with discipline. In early June, Sorge's work becomes more than collection. It becomes a decision about emphasis. He has already sent warnings. Others have sent warnings. But warnings without a date can be filed away as generalities. A date forces action. And a date also exposes the sender. If it is wrong, the consequences travel back along the line to the source. Sorge continues to move through Tokyo as he always has. He attends gatherings. He meets contacts. He reads German publications and Japanese papers with the same steady attention. He notes what is printed and what is not printed. He notices how officials phrase their statements. He notices when phrasing becomes careful, when it becomes confident, when it becomes strained. In the German embassy world, the confidence now has edges. Germany is preparing something vast. Diplomats do not always understand military detail, but they understand weight. They understand when Berlin is serious. They understand when a policy is no longer merely an idea. Sorge receives information that narrows the timing. The details are not all identical, but they align. He hears of an impending attack in the second half of June. He hears that the move is imminent. He hears that the preparations are advanced beyond political theater. A single telegram is drafted with unusual directness. It is not phrased like a cautious speculation. It is framed as a warning with a specific time window. It goes beyond the safe language of possible. It asserts intention and near-term execution. The message must be encoded. It must be reduced to groups of numbers and letters that mean nothing to a casual reader. It must pass through the hands of one man with a transmitter and the nerve to use it. And it must reach Moscow through channels that are already crowded with reports. Clausen prepares his equipment. He does not do it dramatically. He does it like a worker setting tools on a bench, and he checks connections. He verifies power. He confirms the schedule. He knows that each transmission is a risk. He also knows that not transmitting can be its own kind of failure. Sorge brings the drafted telegram. There is no speech made about history. There is only the practical urgency of a man who believes his source and his own reading of events. In a brief exchange, historically plausible and consistent with the way such work is done, the instruction is simple. Transmit at once. The signal goes out. A coded stream crossing distance and bureaucracy. It is received by Soviet communications elements tasked with handling such traffic. It is translated back from cipher into language. It is placed into the system of evaluation and distribution. In Moscow, intelligence is not one unified voice. There are overlapping organizations, rival offices, and political currents. Information from abroad is judged not only by content, but by perceived reliability, by the history of the source, and by how well it matches what leadership expects. Sorge's identity, to those who see the report, is protected under a designation. But the reputation attached to that designation is complicated. Some in Moscow regard the Tokyo source as valuable. Others regard him as too successful, too well-positioned, and therefore suspect. In a system trained to fear provocation and infiltration, a man who claims access to high German circles can be admired and doubted at the same time. The telegram arrives in a climate where warnings have become almost routine. Reports from London, from other European cities, from border districts, from military attachés, all point toward German preparations. Yet the official posture remains fixed. Germany, it is argued, will not risk a two-front situation while Britain continues the war. Germany, it is argued, will not attack before certain diplomatic steps. Germany, it is argued, may be staging pressure to extract concessions. And above all, it is argued, Britain benefits if Moscow panics. The telegram is read, it is assessed, it is discussed, and then, in effect, it is neutralized by interpretation. The process is not a single man slamming a desk, it is more subtle. A phrase becomes unconfirmed. A conclusion becomes possible disinformation. A date becomes speculative. A recommendation becomes avoid provocations. The leadership's central fear is not only invasion, it is also being manipulated into a premature move that could be framed as aggression. In that fear, and a warning that demands immediate military adjustment becomes politically dangerous. If troops are dispersed, if ammunition is issued, if aircraft are moved, it can be read as preparation for offensive action. And if war does not come immediately, those decisions can be used against the people who made them. So the telegram is not treated as a trigger for decisive readiness. It is treated as one report among many. Its clarity becomes a liability. A clear warning is easier to blame if it is wrong. A vague warning is easier to forget if it is right. While the message sits inside Moscow's machinery, time continues to pass at the border. German formations continue to move under cover of routine exercises and rail schedules. Bridges are quietly prepared. Signals units lay lines. Reconnaissance becomes more aggressive. Some Soviet border posts see unfamiliar movement, but local commanders, constrained by instructions, hesitate to act beyond observation. In Soviet airfields near the frontier, aircraft remain clustered. In many places, dispersal is incomplete. Some units have not received full ammunition allotments at forward positions. Some are still building defenses. Some are still in camp patterns that assume time remains. The disconnect between lived reality and official doctrine grows. At the edges of the state, men see danger and try to interpret it. At the center, men see danger and try to manage its political meaning. This is the strain that intelligence warnings are supposed to relieve. Instead, the strain is amplified by distrust. In Tokyo, Sorge's network continues its routine. There is no immediate reply that confirms reception, and there is rarely such confirmation in clandestine work. There are only small indications that messages have been read, small shifts in the requests that come back, if any come at all. Sorge keeps collecting. He watches Japanese decision-making for signs that Japan might strike north against the Soviet Far East. He listens for any sign that Japan has coordinated a northern move with Germany. This matters to Moscow because a two-front war would be catastrophic. But the telegram about the German attack date remains the central fact of early June. A warning has been delivered. It has entered the building. It has not changed the posture. Days pass. German diplomatic circles in Tokyo become more guarded, not because they fear Soviet intelligence, but because Berlin is moving from planning to execution. When operations begin, diplomats often learn after the fact, or they learn just before, under instructions about what to say. Sorge continues to meet Ott and other embassy figures. He uses familiarity to keep access. He avoids sudden changes in behavior. He does not appear anxious. An anxious man is remembered. Clausen continues to manage the radio schedule with restraint. A transmitter used too often becomes a beacon. A transmitter used too rarely becomes useless. The balance is constant. The operational problem now is simple and brutal. If the telegram is correct, time is nearly out. If it is wrong, the network has risked exposure for nothing. And if Moscow has chosen not to act, Sorge will not be there to defend his report when the consequences arrive. The invasion begins. German forces cross the border and strike with speed and coordination. Aerial attacks hit airfields. Armored formations push deep. Communications are disrupted. Frontline units find themselves under attack while still trying to interpret the scale of what is happening. In the first days, confusion spreads through formations that had been told repeatedly to avoid provocation. Some commanders act on their own initiative. Some wait for orders that do not come in time. Some orders come late, or arrive through damaged channels, or contradict what men see on the ground. The costs are immediate. Aircraft are lost on the ground in significant numbers in some sectors. Forward depots are captured. Entire units are cut off by rapid advances. The Soviet state does not collapse, but it absorbs a shock measured in territory, equipment, and men. Back in Tokyo, Sorge's telegram is no longer a matter of prediction, but it has become a matter of record. But this does not mean that the system will admit it was ignored. Institutions rarely confess such things. They move forward, seeking explanations that preserve authority. Within intelligence channels, the role of warnings becomes politicized. Some officers will point to the volume of reports and argue that it was impossible to act on all. Some will argue that the reports were contradictory. Some will focus on the necessity of avoiding provocations. Some will avoid discussing the subject at all. For Sorge, there is no official satisfaction in being correct. Correctness does not protect a clandestine worker. It can, in fact, make him more dangerous to those who ignored him. A man who was right is a reminder of an error. In a system that fears blame, reminders are not welcome. Sorge continues to work because the war has not reduced his task. It has expanded it. Now Moscow needs to know Japan's intentions even more urgently. If Japan attacks the Soviet Far East while Germany advances in the West, the Soviet Union will be forced to divide forces in a moment of extreme vulnerability. Tokyo becomes, in this sense, a front of its own. not with artillery, with memos, meetings, and radio signals. Sorge's network watches Japanese policy debates with careful attention. The Japanese leadership is divided among options. There are voices for the North and voices for the South. There are operational considerations, resource considerations, and political calculations. Germany's move westward does not automatically pull Japan northward. Japan's strategic needs, especially oil, push it toward the south. Sorge must keep reporting what he can confirm. He must do it while Japanese security services are increasingly vigilant. War hardens suspicion. Foreigners are watched more closely. Correspondents are scrutinized. The space for clandestine work narrows. The turning point for Sorge is not a sudden revelation. It is a gradual realization that Moscow's leadership has a particular pattern. It does not simply want information. It wants information that fits its chosen posture at that moment. When information conflicts with that posture, the system may file it away until events force a change. This is not unique to one country. But in the Soviet case, the penalties for contradicting leadership expectations are severe. This shapes the tone of reports, the behavior of analysts, and the willingness to advocate for action. Sorge, operating far from those penalties, still understands them. He has lived inside ideological and institutional rigidity before. He knows that a telegram does not act by itself. It must be believed by the right people at the right time. When the German invasion has begun, the Soviet state moves into emergency mobilization. The scale of the war makes earlier debates about provocation irrelevant. Now the problem is survival and time. Factories will be moved. New armies will be formed. Defenses will be improvised. And intelligence will still be needed, especially regarding Japan. In Tokyo, Sorge's routine continues, but the risks multiply. To remain useful, he must remain close to information. To remain close to information, he must remain visible in circles that are increasingly sensitive. His work depends on normality, and a normality is becoming harder to perform. He continues to meet contacts. He continues to cultivate his access to German officials. He continues to rely on Ozaki's insight into Japanese internal thinking. He continues to bring pieces of the policy puzzle back to Clausen's transmitter. But the earlier ignored telegram hangs over the story like an institutional shadow. It demonstrates the limits of intelligence work when command chooses not to act. A warning sent from far away can reach the capital quickly. It can be accurate, and it can still fail to change behavior if the receiving system does not allow itself to believe it. As months pass, Japanese police and security services intensify investigations into suspected espionage. They do not focus on one man at first. They follow threads. They watch meeting places. They examine associations. They question individuals who appear politically connected. The kind of work Sorge's network does creates traces, not because they are careless, but because the network must exist in the open world to gather information. Any network does. A man meets someone too often. A call happens at a pattern. A foreigner appears too confident in political discussion. A Japanese advisor speaks too freely with a foreign correspondent. Security services are trained to notice such things, especially under wartime conditions. Sorge's personal habits also create vulnerabilities. He is known as a heavy drinker. He is sociable. He takes risks that more cautious operatives would avoid. These habits help him maintain his cover in some circles. They also mean that small lapses are possible. Clandestine work is often undone not by one grand mistake, but by accumulated exposure. In October 1941, Japanese authorities arrest members of the network. The arrests do not happen because of the June telegram alone. They happen because the environment has tightened and investigations have reached the group's real connections. When security services begin to pull on a thread, a network can unravel quickly. Sorge is arrested. Ozaki is arrested. Clausen is arrested. Interrogations follow. Documents are examined. Connections are reconstructed. This phase of the story is administrative and human rather than dramatic. There are questions. There is pressure. There are confrontations with evidence. There is the slow conversion of a secret life into a case file. For the Soviet command structure, the loss of the Tokyo network is a loss of one of its most productive sources in Japan. But there is no public acknowledgement. There is no public defense. Clandestine work rarely earns open protection. Even when it is valuable, it is often politically inconvenient to admit reliance on it. Sorge's earlier warning telegram remains emblematic of this problem. A worker on the far edge of the system did his job. He gathered. He assessed. He warned. But the receiving command did not translate the warning into readiness in time. The consequences of ignoring such a message are not only measured in early defeats, they are also measured in the ways institutions behave afterward. Once a warning has been ignored and proven correct, a rational system might study the failure and adjust. An insecure system may instead protect its own narrative. It may avoid naming the specific moments when a different decision might have helped. In the Soviet case, wartime necessity eventually forces adaptation in many areas. But the deeper habit of controlling information, of distrusting inconvenient reports, and of punishing perceived alarmism does not vanish overnight. Sorge, in Japanese custody, is cut off from the war he tried to warn about. His fate becomes a matter of Japanese courts and prisons. He is not exchanged. He is not rescued. He becomes, in practical terms, expendable to the state he served, whether by decision or by inability. For years, his name is not publicly honored in the Soviet Union. In part, this is because intelligence work is secret by nature. In part, it is because his story does not fit neatly with official narratives of foresight and control. And a man who delivered a correct warning that leadership did not act upon is not a comfortable symbol. The institutional pushback is mostly silent. It is found in what is not said. It is found in the absence of recognition. It is found in the reluctance to admit that a crucial warning was treated as suspect. Sorge is eventually executed by the Japanese in 1944. Ozaki is also executed. Clausen survives imprisonment. The network is gone. Its work ends not with a final triumphant transmission, but with files closed and lives terminated. The ignored telegram, however, remains as an event within a larger pattern of wartime decision-making. It shows that intelligence is not simply about obtaining secrets. It is about whether a command system is prepared to accept a secret as real. It shows that a message can be accurate and still fail to move the levers of policy. It shows that doctrine and political fear can outweigh evidence, even when the evidence is repeated. It also shows the quiet labor behind what later becomes history. Sorge's work was not an act performed on a battlefield. It was performed in rooms where men talked, in notes taken after meetings, in coded groups sent through the air, and in the patience required to keep doing it. The telegram itself was not long. It did not need to be. Its importance lay in timing, clarity, and the institutional choice made at the far end of the line. When historians examine the early days of the German invasion of the Soviet Union, they find many causes for the scale of the disaster. They find strategic surprise. They find operational unpreparedness in certain sectors. As they find failures of communication, they find political constraints imposed on military readiness. Within that complex picture, the ignored warning from Tokyo is one documented strand. It is not the only warning, but it is one of the clearest examples of how a system can receive the right information and still refuse to treat it as actionable. The telegram story is therefore not only about one man. It is about the mechanics of command. It is about how a hierarchy processes risk. It is about how leaders, attempting to control events, sometimes choose interpretations that reduce immediate political discomfort, even when that choice increases operational danger. In the decades after the war, Sorge's legacy shifts. His work is studied more openly. His story becomes a reminder of intelligence's potential and its limits, and the same state that once hesitated to acknowledge him will later honor him. But that later recognition does not erase the moment when a telegram arrived and command chose to ignore its meaning. For a faceless clerk in an intelligence office, that telegram may have been one sheet among many. For an analyst trained to doubt, it may have been another unverified claim. For a leader balancing fear of provocation against fear of war, it may have been a message that threatened a chosen policy. For the men at the border in June 1941, it was the difference between a posture of caution and a posture of readiness. In the end, the telegram stands as a quiet artifact of a larger truth. Wars are not only fought by those who fire weapons, they are also shaped by those who send information, those who filter it, and those who decide whether to believe it. If this story helped clarify how a single ignored message can reveal an entire system, consider subscribing for more forgotten World War II accounts told with documented restraint.